What Republicans will be able to do is keep Biden from taxing and spending even more, which would drive inflation even higher. The win for Republicans is not to change what Biden's doing. That'll have to come in 24. The win for Republicans is just in keeping Biden from making things worse. And that's a big deal. When everything is awful, the first thing you want to do is just say, hey, how about we just don't make it worse, right? That's the goal right now. Democrats are flailing. They have no idea what their argument is. And they seem to now, in these final closing days, have settled on, yeah, inflation's really bad. But you know what? Republicans will actually make it worse. This is Ron Klain, who I think, frankly, is the default president of the United States, is chief of staff for Joe Biden, saying everything's going to be worse with inflation if Republicans win. And frankly, I just don't think this argument's going to play very well given who got us to where we are on inflation. But listen.
Inflation remains the number one economic challenge. The president's put measures in place to start to address that, to improve our progress on inflation, like the Inflation Reduction Act, which takes effect January 1st. We're just a few weeks away from that relief, like the actions he took yesterday on junk fees to bring down everyday costs. We know that's hurting people. We know it's squeezing people, and we're addressing that. And the third point he's going to make today is what's the choice here? What's the choice? Republican leaders in Congress have said that if they get control of the Congress, they're going to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, cut taxes for corporations, raise the deficit. That'll make inflation worse. Get rid of the cap on prescription drug costs that takes effect on January 1st. Get rid of Medicare's ability to negotiate prescription drug costs. That's going to make inflation and everyday costs worse.
Nothing he says will actually make inflation worse. Start with that. It's as though he does not understand what inflation is. You can begin with that very clear picture based on what, as you call him, Clay, the de facto the de facto president, the guy who's probably pushing more decisions from this White House than any other individual. We all know the Inflation Reduction Act in true Orwellian style, right? I mean, people overuse that term, but when you call something the Reduction Act when it will increase a thing,
yes,
you're really messing with people. That's true propaganda. But beyond that, I think that this is a function of Democrats being at that phase of this election cycle where they realize the train is coming down the tracks.
Yes.
That light is in the distance. We are hearing the choo-choo. It is coming. And they got nothing that is going to stop this. And the train is really just a manifestation of the American people getting their first chance to pass judgment on reality for the last 2 years. None of this stuff is hard. None of this stuff is even really in dispute, which is why I think at some level you are seeing, the Ron Klain's a perfect example of this. You know how, you have kids, but your kids are older now, and, you know, if you talk to Clay's kids, it's like they're ready for law school already. But if you're like a little kid, you know when someone says something, you say, you know, I know you are, but what am I? You remember that one? Or just, I'm not a stupid head, you're a stupid head. That is where Democrats are on inflation, on crime, on you name it. We're not the ones that did the bad things. You're the ones that did the bad things that the American people don't like. You're the ones that raised the gas prices and everything else. That's just not going to fly, guys. Like, that's not going to work. But they're totally cornered. They're completely in the corner. They've had control of government for 2 years.
Yeah, and what's funny about everything Ron Klain said is it's all a lie. Literally everything that we just played you of him saying it, because there's no way that Republicans can pass all these bills because presumably Biden would veto them. Yes. Right? So this idea of they're going to immediately repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. Well, I would love if the Republicans could do that, but it's not going to be a veto-proof majority in either house that's going to be able to override the president. So all of the things that he just ticked off, they may well pass bills and say, hey, we don't want 87,000 more IRS agents. We want for people to get their jobs back. But most for COVID vaccine mandates, if they lost them, most of that, Buck, unless the president signs it, is just going to be to show what Republicans would do, which is why this argument that Republican House and Senate would make inflation worse is totally wrong. Because what Republicans will be able to do is keep Biden from taxing and spending even more, which would drive inflation even higher. The win for Republicans is not to change what Biden's doing. That'll have to come in 24. The win for Republicans is just in keeping Biden from making things worse. And that's a big deal. When everything is awful, the first thing you want to do is just say, hey, how about we just don't make it worse?
I think
that's the goal right now.
That's the truth, is that this is a stop the bleeding election.
Yes.
That's all. That's all this is. We've seen the Democrats are the surgeon, and they've been going all crazy with that scalpel, and there's just mayhem in the operating room. This election is the first chance the American people have to say, okay, Doc, you've had one too many scotches. We're going to escort you out of the operating room.
Yes.
Right? We can talk about who the next head surgeon is going to be, and we certainly will. We can talk about what the changes will be going forward. But everything that they have done has been demonstrably bad in effect. They said X would happen, Y would happen. They said the economy would be thriving. The economy is in recession and likely to get worse in the next 6 to 12 months. They say that if we only invest more in social workers and prosecute people less effectively, go easier on criminals, and there will be less crime. Obviously, catastrophically wrong on that issue. And the good thing about the internet, although there's a lot of stuff with the social media platforms that's meant to allow them to get away with the propaganda, we can all go back and see what they said. We can see what the decisions are. The American people, it's very easy for us to recognize what were the promises made about the vaccine mandate a year ago, for example, when they were firing people. I mean, right a year ago was when we're getting into, hold on, there's going to be a federal vaccine mandate too?
The winter of death.
Yeah. I mean, they were saying that if you were unwilling to get this shot, and this is from the president of the United States, you were a reckless murderer by default, meaning you were engaging in effectively a negligent homicide of your neighbor because you weren't going to get these shots. That was the more Cuomo was even more explicit. Remember that? Andrew Cuomo was you're killing grandma if you don't do what we say. These people are out of their minds. And look, we all know this. 45%, maybe 40% of people are just going to vote Democrat no matter what in this election. But to those who can be persuaded based upon facts, evidence, and experience, if we can't crush the commies in this election, it really is time to look for some land in the South Pacific somewhere, because their failures are just beyond, honestly, my wildest imagination. I knew Biden would be bad. I didn't think it would be. This is pathetic. This goes beyond, I don't like what they're doing. This is, the Biden regime is the equivalent of the Fetterman debate performance. It is indefensible, sad, and destructive.
I think we need to, this is where I would say set expectations, because this is, again, a just keep Biden from making things worse election. I wish we could go out and we could say, hey, we're going to immediately start fixing everything. But the first thing you have to do is block Biden from making everything worse. And then the argument shifts to, okay, what can we do to make things better? And honestly, that's going to be the 2024 campaign. But here's what I feel good about, Buck. I'm sticking to it. I'll give you my predictions every day going up to it.
Well, you think we're going to win every close race right now. Is there one really important close race you don't think we're going to win at this phase? Because we can just skip right to that one. You think all the Senate seats go for us?
I'm nervous about Michigan. I'm nervous about New York. And I'm nervous about
governor's
Oregon.
Races. So you're the three governor's races.
Three governor's races I'm nervous about, just because you don't know exactly what. First of all, that's tough battlegrounds, right? New York, Michigan, and Oregon. But in the Senate, I feel very good about Arizona. I feel very good about Nevada. And I feel very good about Georgia flipping. So I think it's going to be 53-47 in the Senate. But I'm nervous about Zeldin. I'm nervous about Gretchen Whitmer. And I'm nervous about Christine Drazen in Oregon, how those governor's races are going to go. Now, I want them to win, but those are the ones that I'm nervous about.
I'm seeing 52-48 in the Senate. I can't tell you which Senate seat we don't win, but I just don't think we're going to be able to run the table. I think it's either I don't know. I mean, it's either going to be Masters or I can't imagine Fetterman wins at this point. But somebody I think is going to have a less than optimal election result from the Senate side. I would love that Tudor Dixon to win. We have so many Michigan listeners, Clay. It's going to be such a tight election. The one
I think
that
all
I
those
feel,
governor races are.
And this might just be belief overriding analysis. Lee Zeldin is going to be the next governor of New York State. I'm feeling it. Lee Zeldin, which is in some ways the most monster upset of all of these. In some ways, that's the biggest, going right into the Democrats' backyard and taking a big W. I mean, that's the way I see it.
The sign of how panicked they are in New York, Buck, is I believe they're trying to send Joe Biden up to Western New York to go campaign. Isn't this like his last campaign stop? Is he there today? If you look, this is why I say it's always important to cut through the noise. I like to look at the gambling odds. I like to look at the polling. But the other thing I would layer on top of that is look at where Democrats right now are expending their resources. They are trying to cover deep blue states. They had Biden in Pennsylvania. They've been out in Oregon. They've been out in Washington State and also California. And he's now going to New York, I think. Right, Buck?
Yeah, he's trying. The problem is if you don't send the sitting president to back up people in tight races, you're basically admitting he is politically a negative. You're admitting he's toxic. If you do send him, you're tying Joe Biden, confused, befuddled, incompetent Biden, to be an anchor in these close races. Because what are Democrats? What is I forget her name, Allison, the congressional candidate in Northern Virginia. Anyway,
Spanberger.
Thank you. What does she do? Oh, I'm not one of those Biden Democrats, right? This is what they're all, I don't just vote with Biden all the time. That's the only way they can win.
Yeah, look, and they are right now, he's not going to any state that's actually going to be a toss-up because all of those candidates are saying don't come. But I actually think he hurt Fetterman when he went to Pennsylvania, and I actually think he's going to hurt Hochul when he goes to New York. But those are the ones that I'm most nervous about, just flipping some of those governor seats. I feel really good about the Senate. And honestly, I feel increasingly pretty fantastic about not only a red wave, but a red tsunami as we sit here 11 days out.